This morning, I sat on the porch of my house in Asheville, watching the thick fog slowly, reluctantly, dissipate over the centuries-old pine trees. In these mountains, fog is not just weather. It is a veil that separates us from eternity. And today, accompanied by the sound of birds waking up, it dawned on me. I am 84 years old. In the silence of this old house, smelling of cedar and yellowed pages of the Bible, emptiness is no longer just the absence of sound. Now it is a library of echoes. Over the past 8 decades, I have watched the face of this country change. I remember the days when we left our doors unlocked and the days when fear became our closest neighbor. But more importantly, I have seen people pass away. I buried my parents, my brothers, my sisters, and my oldest friends from seminary. And finally, I walked down the aisle with the one who I thought would hold my hand until the very last second, my Sarah. They are all gone now. When you reach this age, you inevitably become a ghost in a world that belongs entirely to the young. You see them rushing to their offices in Charlotte, worrying about things that, from my vantage point, seem like not even grains of sand, but dust in the wind. They look at me with pity when they meet me at the grocery store, or ask the obligatory question, "How does it feel, Reverend?" They think being the last survivor is a tragedy. But there is a secret to turning 84 that you won't find in theology books. When everything and everyone disappears, what remains is not nothing. What remains is truth. If you are younger than me, listen to the rustling of the leaves. If you are my age, pull your chair closer. Today I want to tell you about things that do not burn in fire or sink in the ocean of time. About what remains when the phone finally falls silent and the ringing in your ears becomes the only melody. The first thing I have learned in these 80-odd years is that we never, under any circumstances, truly own anything or anyone. In my 40s and 50s, when I was leading a thriving parish, I thought my life was defined by what I had built. I looked at the new prayer hall, my reputation as an impeccable pastor, my cozy house with a white picket fence. I carefully guarded these trophies, believing they were part of my being. But at 84, I look at my hands, wrinkled, covered with the stains of time, once strong, now trembling, and I realize they are empty. And you know what? It's the most wonderful feeling in the world. I saw the houses where I prayed being sold. I saw my professional legacy in the church being forgotten by people who weren't even born when I delivered my best sermons. There are no trophies left on the shelf. All that remains is the character you forged in those moments when you tried to win those trophies. I finally understood that the people we love, our spouses, our children, do not belong to us. God simply lends them to us, like a rare book from the heavenly library. We are only stewards of their time for a very short period. When you stop trying to hold on to people as your property and start simply enjoying their company as a gift, the bitterness of their departure changes. It ceases to be a feeling of being robbed and becomes a quiet, deep gratitude for being allowed to touch that soul at all. In the end, all that remains is the love you gave without reserve, because it is the only currency that will not depreciate and will not be sold at auction after your death. Your property will be sold off, your house will be repainted, but the love woven into the hearts of others is your only real mark on this earth. In my youth, when I first took over the parish in the shadow of the Blue Ridge Mountains, I was obsessed with high points. I looked forward to Sunday morning services when the hall was full, to big holidays when the choir sang so loudly that the stained glass windows shook. I built my life as a series of ascents, from one successful project to the next, from one loud prayer to the next. I always looked to the horizon, waiting for the second coming or at least the next church expansion. I thought holiness was something grand that happened at the peak of effort. But at 84, sitting on my porch, I realized that life, and faith itself, is not made up of these rare mountain peaks, but of the long, dusty road between them. God does not live only in the thunder and lightning of Sinai. He lives in the quiet whisper of the morning breeze. If I could go back, I would not strive to build the largest church in the county. I would pay more attention to the details that I previously considered secondary. I would linger longer over a cup of coffee with a widow who just wanted to talk about her roses, rather than rushing off to a board meeting. I would have listened more carefully to the birds, realizing that their singing is also a form of worship, perhaps more sincere than my rehearsed speeches. At the end of a long life, what remains is not a list of your achievements before the altar, but a collection of tiny, almost invisible moments. The sunlight on an old bench, the taste of homemade pie, the warmth of a friend's hand. It turned out that these little things were God Himself, whom I had been trying to find in grandiose plans. One of the most difficult aspects of outliving your generation is the loneliness that sets in. We are Americans. We are a generation of doers. We were taught to be constantly busy, even in service. We believed that idleness was a sin, so we filled every minute with work, meetings, and noise. But when the parishioners moved away, the children built their lives in other states, and friends passed away one by one, I was left alone in this house, which suddenly seemed too big. Most people spend their whole lives running away from themselves, even using religion as a way to drown out their own thoughts. They sing loud hymns so they don't have to hear the cries of their souls. But at 84, it is no longer possible to run away. Old knees do not allow you to hide in the hustle and bustle. And in this forced sitting, I discovered a strength in myself that I had not even suspected during decades of preaching. All that remains is your inner fortress, what you have built between yourself and the Creator when no one was looking. If you have spent your whole life building relationships only with your pastor image and not with yourself, old age will be hell for you. But if you have found peace within, loneliness becomes a refuge. I finally realized that I am Michael, just a human being, and that is enough for God. I learned to forgive the ambitious young man I was at 25 and the strict legalist I was at 50. In the end, all that remains is quiet peace with the person you see in the mirror every morning. You realize that God has always been your best friend, and you yourself are His most beloved child. It's just that before, the noise of your own ambitions prevented you from realizing it. People often ask me, a pastor with half a century of experience, if I have any regrets. Of course I do. Only someone who has never truly lived or who has become completely hard-hearted would say they don't. But at 84, you begin to see a clear difference between simple regret for missed opportunities and burning remorse. I regret the risks I didn't take for fear of appearing not pious enough. I regret the words of love I kept to myself, hiding behind the strictness of my office or false pride. But the most painful thing is the remorse for those moments when I chose to be right rather than kind. We, people of faith, often fall into this trap. We spend an incredible amount of energy defending our rightness, proving the truth of dogma, or protecting our theological ego. We argue until we are hoarse. We harbor resentment toward those who think differently. We build walls out of our convictions. But today, watching the names in my old address book being crossed out one by one, I realized a terrible truth. Being right is the loneliest and most meaningless victory in the world. At the end of the road, when the shadows lengthen, all that remains is the realization that kindness was always the only right answer, regardless of the subject of the dispute. God will not ask you how accurately you quoted Scripture. He will ask how much warmth you gave to those who were freezing next to you. If you need to call someone today, do it. Not to settle old scores or prove your point, but simply to say, I'm glad you're in this world. Because one day they won't be there, and then your rightness won't be worth a penny. There is a strange, almost mystical charm in watching the world continue to move without your participation. I sit on my porch and see teenagers from neighboring houses, their gadgets, their strange slang, their frenzied, almost frightening energy. At first, it made me feel bitter and resentful. It seemed to me that the world I had tried so hard to guide was simply leaving me behind, throwing me to the side of history like an old, useless book. But then, on one quiet evening, I was filled with peace. I realized that this is how it should be. This is the divine order. My role has changed. I am no longer the one who leads the community. I am a witness. I am here to see how the great cycle of life continues. In the eyes of my grandson, who comes to visit me, I see the sparkle in my own father's eyes as he looked at me 80 years ago. I see that I am not the beginning or the end, but just one stitch in an infinitely long and beautiful tapestry woven by the Creator. My task now is not to lead the parade and demand attention for myself, but to sincerely cheer on those who follow, standing on the sidelines. In this letting go of my own importance lies a tremendous, almost childlike freedom. All that remains is the pure joy of life being renewed and the knowledge that a tiny part of my story is forever woven into their great, just beginning destinies. I am no longer the main character in this drama. I am the one who blesses the stage before the new actors come out. In my youth, I lived in anticipation of big dates. I thought that my faith and my life were measured by milestones. The day of my ordination, the day of my wedding, the day we opened the shelter, or that grand vacation to the Holy Land that we had been preparing for years. I always looked to the horizon, waiting for the next sign or the next triumph. But now, at 84, when I look at my old photo albums, I realize that life is not the mountain peaks, but the paths between them. True closeness with God and people did not happen on the podium under the spotlight, but in those moments that I then considered transient. If I could go back, I would not strive for more resounding success or a more influential position in the Senate. I would linger longer in the moment when the morning dew still glistens on the grass. I would drink my morning coffee more slowly, inhaling its aroma like incense. I would listen more attentively to the birds, not trying to drown out their singing with my thoughts about business. At the end of a long journey, all that remains is a collection of small, fragile, and beautiful details. The smell of old leather in my library, the warmth of a sunbeam on my cheek, the taste of fresh bread. I used to consider this the background of life, but on the threshold of eternity, I realized that this was life itself. The rest was just scenery. So what remains when everyone is gone and the noise of the crowd has finally died down? Gratitude remains. Not the polite, perfunctory gratitude we teach our children at Sunday dinner, but a fierce, piercing, almost heartbreaking gratitude for the very impossibility of this miracle. For the fact that I, a simple guy from North Carolina, was allowed to be here. For the fact that I loved, even when it brought pain. For the fact that I fell, but was given the strength to get up. I was fortunate enough to see almost 30,000 sunrises. Each one was a unique painting, created by the Creator especially for us, and I often didn't even look up from my papers. Now that I am 84, I am no longer afraid of the dark. I have learned an important thing that they don't teach in seminaries. Light never truly disappears. It doesn't go out when we close our eyes. It just moves to the next room, where we will all enter sooner or later. This gratitude is not just a feeling. It is a state of mind that makes even a lonely old age fulfilling. If you are listening to me now, don't wait until you are 80 to find that spark. Look for it in your next breath. It is in the person sitting across the table from you. It is in the silence of your own heart, which you have tried so long to fill with busyness. I am 84 years old, and I have understood something that cannot be read in the wisest books on theology. All our lives we fear the darkness. We fear the moment when the candle of our life begins to flicker and fade. But sitting here in the twilight of North Carolina, I see that the light does not disappear. It simply changes its nature. When we are young, light for us is the spotlights of achievement, the glitter of gold, and the lights of cities. But by the age of 80, that light becomes soft, like the glow of a fireplace in an old house. I am no longer afraid of passing away. I have come to understand that death is not a wall, but a door, and behind it is not emptiness, but the very light we have sought all our lives in the little things. It has simply moved to the next room. I often imagine how I will enter there and be greeted by Sarah, my parents, and friends I haven't seen in decades. And the most amazing thing is that there will be no place for titles, resentments, or arguments about who is right. Only what we have managed to nurture in our hearts here on earth will remain there. Faith is not the certainty that you are doing everything right. Faith is the willingness to enter that next room with an empty bag, but with a heart full of gratitude. If you are listening to me now, don't wait until you are 84 to find what really remains. Don't wait until your knees are weak and your friends are just names on a prayer list. Look for it now. Look for it in the silence that you so diligently try to drown out with the TV or endless scrolling on your phone. Look for it in the eyes of the person who lives under the same roof as you, but with whom you haven't had a heart-to-heart conversation in a long time. A real home is not a building with a white picket fence. It is a state of your spirit when you don't have to pretend, don't have to run, and don't have to prove anything. God is not a strict judge on a cloud, but a loving Father who has been sitting next to you on this very porch all this time, waiting for you to finally be silent and notice His presence. I am leaving in silence with a light heart because I have finally found something that will never rot, be sold, or be forgotten. I have found love that is wider than any words and higher than any mountains. And this love is now all I have. And believe me, it is more than enough. Thank you for sitting with me on this porch and listening to the story of an old pastor. If these words have touched your heart and helped you see the light in your own life today, please subscribe to this channel. We are here to search together for what is truly important. Like this video, so that it can find those who are feeling lonely or lost in the noise of this world. May this message be a quiet haven for you. And please leave a comment below. Tell us what you have learned to value most after going through difficulties or years of hardship. I read every word you write, and your thoughts make this old house in the mountains much cozier. Share this video with someone you love. Just send them the link and say, "I'm glad you're in my life." Don't wait until tomorrow. Do it right now. God bless you and your loved ones. May your path always be illuminated by peace and gratitude. Until we meet